Okay, so we started recording and yes. Okay, so welcome all. This is our 49th DC Open discussion. And today we are going to talk about some questions which are already there. And then we'll just see what's new in BC 18 CU3. There's a very small but a very important change that impacts developers, which is part of BC 18 CU3. And then we'll come back to what we were discussing last week about interfaces. And in this scenario, we'll try to extend the existing interface that we have or build in the last meeting. So let's go through the normals. If you are here for the first time, you register here. If you want to save hassle of registering every week, then just drop your name and email in the chat and I'll make you default attendee going forward. Till the point you send me an email and say, I don't want to be a default attendee. That's also an option. So if you want to save hassle, then drop your name and email. That's it. Okay, what's next? This weekend, DynamicsCon session submission was completed, which was yesterday, was the last day of submitting sessions on DynamicsCon. And I just wanted to highlight some of the sessions of people who attend DC Open Discussion so that we can vote at least for the new presenters and at least the people we know. And for sure, you can use other votes to vote other sessions. So here are two sessions from David. You might have seen him in some of the meetings in past. He might be here later today. He's talking about how you mentor people who are in NAV to Business Center. That's a good thing, I guess, to talk about because we all, or most of us, are from NAV and have switched to Business Center. So it'll be good to understand how should we help our team to go that route. And then the other one is on-prem, how you maintain an on-prem BC environment, where he'll stretch more about SQL servers and things, which is super interesting because on-prem, the performance is still with partners, the performance issues and all. So do vote for those. Then we have a new presenter this time. Tanya, you would have seen her in these meetings. She's presenting for the first time, rookie speaker, and she'll be talking about report extensions in Business Center. So we haven't talked about report extension, so that's a good thing to talk about or to learn. So let's see how that session goes. If we vote, she'll be presenting. So, and last not last, but I'll be doing something about 10 tips for BC users, developers, and administrator. And I'm pretty sure you have heard about all those things. But if you want, you can vote for it. I don't know which one of David's will be selected because as far as I know, one person can only present one topic based on the maximum vote that he receives. I'll be interested in seeing the mentoring one. So let's see what happens. And Bansal sir, I was thinking that you are submitting one, but I didn't saw yours there. So,
Yeah, once I thought I'll submit, but I was BG occupied and seems I forgot it. So that's why it's gone.
okay, let's see next time.
Maybe next time.
April, when it happens again.
Okay.
I don't exactly remember when the voting starts, but keep an eye on it, and I'll talk about it whenever that happens, so we can help people by voting their topics to be available on the session based on what you like or not. Okay, so now let's directly jump into questions. The first question is from Shahid about please describe the process of connecting to Dynamics 365 Business Central apps using Business Central on-prem. No, I don't see Shahid here, and I'm a little bit confused what the question is. So, Shahid, if you're talking about Business Central App Store using Business Central on-prem, that's not possible. The App Store is specifically for customers who are on Business Central SaaS. And if you're talking about using an app which is built for app source to be used in Business Central on-premise, then you'll have to contact that ISV or reseller who owns the app, and I'm pretty sure they will be able to provide you the same app for on-prem also. You can't download an app from app source and install it on-prem. That's how it is right now. Maybe it changes in the future versions, but as of today, that's how it is. And Sandeep, I see your hand raised.
Well, it looks like he's asking there's an app in the Windows Store for Business Central. Maybe how to connect that app to the on-premise instance. That basically requires, I believe, HTTPS, the
Yes,
SSL.
self-signed certificate or SSL
Yeah.
paid certificate or a free certificate.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and because I haven't tried with Business Central versions, I surely have an article and done it in Dynamics now.
Well, I've tried it and it works fine.
It works. Okay,
It
well,
works.
that's good. Yeah. So if I'm not wrong, we just need a SSL certificate, and the authentication cannot be Windows
Yes.
because your phone doesn't. If you have a Microsoft phone, that's something else. Then maybe you can use Windows authentication. But if you are not using Windows Phone, then you'll have to rely on other authentication method than Windows.
This app is also available on
App Stores?
not App Stores or Microsoft Store, so you can have it on your desktop.
Oh, as a tablet app. Yeah. The
No, not a
tablet
tablet
app.
app, proper app.
Yeah, so
Normal
that's the
application.
same app which is available on the Windows Store can also be used on the tablets.
Yes,
That's
same.
kind of the screen resolution that they suggest on that. But yeah,
No, I don't know whether it works just like a normal Windows exe application on the desktop. It's
yes,
not for Windows, PC. There's a proper app. The same
right, on the
application.
Windows Store, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll hear it from Shahid when he's here, if he joins today. Or otherwise, I'll give it a try. I haven't tried it for a while, but as Sandeep is saying, he have tried it and it works fine. So if Shahid, you have a specific question, maybe we can talk about it next week. Okay. The next question is again from Shahid, and this time he's saying that there are customization in the base tables, added few fields, having data. To upgrade to BC18, I have created the extension for those base tables and created the custom app. When I do upgrade as per Microsoft procedures, which is here, sorry, I have published these apps, no issues. When I try to do a sync nav app, I'm getting an error that field unrealized gain account ledger cannot be located. So Shahid, it seems that before starting the upgrade, if it is an upgrade, let me go to that link which you have sent. And so yeah, before starting the upgrade, you need to make sure that all your objects in the database are replaced with base BC14 objects. Because sometimes we think we have removed all the customs from the database, but if there is a field deletion, you will not understand it, that it has been removed. So the best way is to replace all objects from the base Microsoft object. But you are in that case referring to the wrong article, because this is not an upgrade process. This is a technical upgrade process. And the difference between technical upgrade and an upgrade is, and I'm pretty sure everybody have done technical upgrades in past. When you open a lower version database into a higher version executables, that's what the technical upgrade is. Like back in old days when Windows was not supporting NAV4 or 3 executables, people used to convert their database to be using executables of 2009. And the database and the fields and schema is still from 3.7 or 4.3. But their EXEs were from BC, NAV 2009. So this article talks about that step. If you're talking about data upgrade to BC18, then you should come here, 2019 Wave 2, and then talk about upgrade an unmodified database. So at this point, using this article, what it means, an unmodified application, that means there are no custom objects and no base object modified in BC14, which are trying to upgrade to BC18. You cannot have any customs in BC14 at this point. So this is the process for that upgrade, and you can follow this as it is. And I've done it, so I know this one works. So no problem at this point. So don't refer to the article which talks about technical upgrade. Refer to the article which talks about upgrade. Anyone else have any questions on that before we move forward? Okay, so now let's talk about the next question, which is from Binil. And Binil says he needs an idea for a customization, a sales document with different sell to and bill to customer. For a header, system is picking the default dimension from bill to customer, and then the header dimension are obviously copied to the lines. The customization request that you have is for each item line, they want global dimension 1 from sell to customer default dimension. Okay, so in this case, and let's maybe spend some time on this, because I get these questions around dimensions most of the time, from the time when dimensions were changed. So it's a good talk. Let me know if I have to zoom my screen, if it doesn't look clean. Okay, I'll just change it to 0.82. Okay. Now let me just change it to be 60,000, which we are working on from last week in 50,000. And let me make a file. So as Binil is saying that they want specifically global dimension 1, I prefer to keep that option a little bit open, because you might change, your customer has ability to change the dimension in the setup. So I would not rely on that. So what I'll suggest is, let's create a field on general ledger setup so that user can decide which field will be used. So what I've done, because this was already done, I've created a field called sales line dim code, default dim code, you can call it, on the general ledger setup, and then also added that into the page. So this is consider this dimension code while looking for the value to be copied from default dimension for sell to customer, instead of defaulting it to be global dimension 1, because as I said earlier, that global dimension 1 can change anytime by the customer. So now let's try to even this out, which is at 60. And let's say this is my dim. I'll try to subscribe the event once the item number is being validated, because that's the point the dimensions get copied. At this point, what I want is an event from table file. And the event that I want is on after validate event of the field And these two will be false because I don't want to skip if the license or the user don't have permission. Let's call this procedure update alt Tim, and I just need the current record from it. As I'm calling the on after validate, that means whatever execution of the on validate trigger that need to be done by Microsoft is completed. And now I want to update the dimension on my line. As we have created that setup there, general ledger setup. So let's do that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll get my general ledger setup. And he said he only want to do it when it's item. So my default style, and correct me guys if I'm wrong somewhere, is to find false positive in the process and get out of my subscriber as soon as I can if the conditions are not matching. So what I normally will do in this situation is I'll say that if the record type is not item, and leave this, don't do anything with it. The other false positive that I need is maybe user haven't filled in the value in my general ledger setup field. So I'll say that if it is blanked out, then again exit. Don't waste any more time into the subscriber. The other thing that I need to check is that dimension is available in the default dimension of the sell to customer. Do here is I'll try to get the default dim. And I'll say if my default dim dot get, and what are the primary keys of it, table ID. So let's say database. And then its number, which is my rec.sell2 customer number. And then dimension code, which comes from this field. If there are no default dimension for this, in that case also leave the subscriber. Don't waste any time here. Now, if all that matches and I got my default dimension at this point, I also want to check that there is a possibility that default dimension may have the dimension value code set to be empty in case of just to be code mandatory. That's a situation over there. So I'll leave that situation also. Now, once I'm here, now I'll have to write my code. So there is a code unit, if you haven't seen that, it's called dimension management. And what we have to do is just change the dimension ID for that particular record. There is a function which takes get me the dimension set ID, get dimension set or something, dimension set. This method takes a temporary variable of temp dimension set entry and the dimension set entry that you want to fetch into this temp dim set entry variable. So if I have a temp dim set entry, which is a record of my dimension set entry, I can just pass that here and also pass my record dot dimension set. Values all the records into this particular variable, which is a temporary variable. that from this. And did I miss something? Get dimension set. Oh, dimension set. So this will fill up my temp dimension set entry, which have all the records for each dimension that is used. And I can then add the new record in this temp dimension set entry based on sell to customer number if required. You can say that dimension code is equal to the dimension code is equal to this, which is selected on my general ledger setup. And then I can say temp dim set entry dot dimension code equal to what comes from my default dimension, which I have already fetched for the sell to customer number. And then there is one more parameter which is important to be set called dimension value ID. Dim set entry dot dimension value ID. Dimension value ID can only be get from the dimension value table. So I can just do a, once everything is done, I can do a dimension value dot get based on the code here, general ledger setup, and the dimension code, and then the code. So the code can be fetched from the default dimension that we have coded, which is this dimension value code. So for this particular dimension, I am just setting this dimension value, and this record then can give me my dimension value ID, which is mandatory when you are trying to write into a temp variable of dimension set entry. Now there's a possibility that there is already a value assigned from the bill to customer number. So I can do a, if not my temp dimension entry dot insert, then my temp set entry can be modified. Whenever you're doing any customs on your dimension set entry, remember that your dimension set entry should always be temporary. You should never write directly into dimension set entry table ever. So once this combination has been fetched, where all the values in temp dim set entries are copied from whatever the dimension set ID that is assigned to line, and then I'm just trying to modify or add a value based on the dimension code and the default dimension value for that customer. Once that is done, I can check, or I can get the new dimension set entry from my dimension management with get dim set entry or something, dim set ID. This one takes a parameter of dimension set entry record. Can pass my dim set entry, and this will return me the new dimension set ID based on whatever the content of this particular value. And it returns me an integer. So obviously the dimension set entry. So if whatever the value returned is not equal to current value dot dimension set ID, then and only then, because I don't want to change it if it is same, my dim set ID, or let's store it on a variable, dim set ID. In my on this logic, and then I just want to check if my new MSET ID is not equal to my current MSET ID, then that get assigned to my record. That way you can update the dimension of that particular line which you want to change. So let's fix this. Okay. Once it gets published. And seems it published. Okay. We'll stop this. Okay, so we are here. So let's quickly go and once it opens, set up our general ledger setup so that we can and this is our new field. And let me choose, let's say area. Area is none of that dimension, but okay. If you want, you can choose the department one, or let's just to make sure it's Benel's case. Let's choose department because he wanted to be specific on department. Let's pick a customer and check its dimensions. Okay. They have a department sales. Okay, let's pick the one and we'll try to change the dimension of department. It's also sales, so let's just modify this to be production. So the 2000 have production and 1000 have sales. Now let's create a new sales order for this customer. Once we do that, the order should get the dimension from the sell to customer number right now, which is sales. But then his case is that if we come down here and change bill to be 20,000, the system populates the dimension or change the dimension to be production prod based on the bill to customers number that is chosen there. So, okay, now the department is production on the header. And if I go back to my lines and I try to choose an item, have a dimension different than the header, just the department one. So the department here is sales, whereas in header, it is production based on the bill to customer number. And that's because that code logic has been executed, which we have written, and other dimension will remain same as of header. So here it is production, and here it is that went. Yeah. Here it is sales. So the thing that I kind of keep on getting frequently is how we do dimension updates. And this is more or less the logic around it, that you need to put everything into a temp from the existing dimension set ID. And then on that temp, whatever modification you want to make, you can change that and then pass it to this method and it will return you the new dimension set ID based on the content of this temp variable. So to fetch all the records from the current dimension set ID, use this method, which is get dimension set, and it will automatically extract all the combinations from this and put it into template set entry. And then if you're trying to add or modify anything into it, you need to make sure that you set these 3 values. And then this will give you the new dimension set entry. And then you can assign it to that record. Any questions by anyone on this one before we leave this? Okay. So let us know if this solves your problem, but this is how we should be doing it, I guess. Okay. What's new in BC18 CU3? This was one of the most requested feature for the reports because developers were having hard time while they were building reports and their layout doesn't match to what they were expecting from that report. So in the legacy versions of Dynamics Nav, if you do a help about this report and then preview the report and go back to help about this report, it used to show you the data set, which is the flat file of all the records that are being generated to build the design or the layer to execute the layout of it. And this was one of the top ideas in the PC ideas list, and Microsoft planned to do it in a minor hotfix. So now when you click on send to, after you have assigned all the filters that you want, you can do a Excel data and layout, which is just the layout more or less, which means it gives you your report into Excel. But then there is a new option of Microsoft Excel document data only. With this option, you will get back the flat file that we were using in past to see the data set of your report, which is this. So it'll bring back the same old, pretty nice to have feature, and a report developer will surely understand the value of it. But this is a simple one, the report. But if you go into a document reports and an invoicing report, and your design doesn't match to your expectation, that's where we needed this option. As in, when I do reports, I always want to see what my data set look like before I actually start building my report design. This is available on 18.3 and will be available going forward. And it works in the same way. Instead of doing a help about this page and things like that, you can just download the data set into Excel from the request page. Anybody who is waiting for this in this meeting? Or that's just me who liked it so much.
No, hi, Saurav. I was also waiting for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very good feature. Very good to have.
Yeah, it was, it was making report developers like life so painful without having a look on the data set when design doesn't match the reality.
Yeah, I remember watching your YouTube video on making reports. I think that was in
Okay.
16, and they use this feature extensively, like seeing the data, and
Yes.
it is so easy. Now it is there, so in future we could use it properly.
Yes. Okay. Sounds good. Let's quickly complete what we have left on interfaces last week so that we can completely understand about extending the interfaces, which we haven't done in the last one. So just a recap of what we talked about last week is an interface is just provides you the method detail which are mandatory to be defined by any implementation of that interface. So the interface is just a collection of the method that that interface supports. But to actually write the logic for this, you will need to use code units to implement these interfaces. Either you are using that any of these procedures or not, you will at least have to define all these procedures in every implementation of this interface. And to make sure which implementation is called, that is driven by an enum, which decides which of these implementation will be called when user is trying to use an action or a process is trying to use that interface. That enum defines which one interface will be used. Now, what we have done in our last session is we created this main extension, which had two implementation defined, just to make sure so that we remember this. one was implementing this and the other one which was also implementing this. And then we had two enums just to make sure. One was just a field on the customer card, and the other one which was defining which implementation will be called when you set different values in uh, on the setup. And the interface had 4 methods. And then we had a page extension where we were calling one of these methods. And the other one is the page extension where we have given that option to choose which method to be used based on that enum. And then we added that enum into table for sure, and also an enum onto the customer. Now this all looks good, that I have designed an interface and make it available for my customer. But what happens if one of you is working for that customer and want to enhance or define a new implementation of the same interface? It can be done with two simple things. You'll have to extend the enum to define your new implementation, and you'll have to define a new implementation for that interface. So let's quickly do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the app dot. Is this one published? I'm not sure. So let me just quickly publish. So this will get published. But the idea is that we will have another extension which depends on this extension. And I need these 4 details: version, publisher, and name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this main one and I'm going to come to this sub one. And in this app.json, I'm going to define a dependency of my main extension. I don't need these two. And just to make sure that I don't. What I've done is now my sub interface, sub extension has a dependency on the main one. And when I download the symbol, now it will also download the symbol for the main AL interface, which is there. Let me just download the symbols. And I got this here. The symbol is here now. So now as a developer, I can go ahead and extend whatever is done by, in this case, by other developer, or in a normal situation done by Microsoft. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to create an enum extension. And I'll just delete this. In the enum extension, I'll say it as creating implementation enum extension.al. And then I'll create a tenum extension. Allow me to extend that existing enum, which is already there. So let's use a 3001. Doesn't overlap. Let me just check into the main one. Oh, this is an enum extension, so it will not. Okay. And then it's called as building implementation. And it extends my SDH rating implementation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new value. And when you're extending enum, you should not use a value within Microsoft range, as we always do. So we'll use a value 50,000 and we'll call it as my customer. Our user will have a choice on their general ledger setup to choose a custom implementation. Then in the implementation, I'll call that this is SDH rating, and I'll just give it a fake name, and then I'll create a code unit for it. That I'm going to create, which will implement that same interface. So let's come here and write a new code unit into this called SDH custom rating. That'll be my T code unit, and this will, what's the number I have used there? I don't exactly remember, but okay, let's pick a random number. And this one is whatever the name I have copied. And as we did earlier, it implements my rating. It is, which is from my main app. Now, as soon as I've done this, there is an error message because I haven't defined all the methods. So let's go back into one of the existing implementation in main, and just to save time, I'll copy any of those. Okay, let's copy this. I have defined all the methods. The error is gone. And let's just quickly change this to be, let's say, 5,000. Make it unique. And also apply some filter here. Now this is my custom implementation of the same interface, which is defined by the parent one. And I can publish this. So let's publish this. I'm on sub, yes, and I have an enum extension, and I have my own implementation, which is for now a copy of the base one. We have just changed the formula how the rating is calculated. Once I publish this, now I have two extensions. One which is containing the the interface with two definitions or implementation, and the second one which I just published is my sub extension. So if I go now into my extension management, I should see that I have an AL interface, which is my main app, and then I have an AL interface sub, which is my dependent extension. So if I go to my general ledger setup, you'll be able to see that I have one more option. Oh, was that here? No, maybe it is on the sales and receivable setup. So if I go here, I should be able to see now that I have an option of custom, which is coming from my enum extension, which I created here. So when the customer chooses custom here, during code execution, system will pick this code unit, which is pretty obvious. Okay. Now, if I go to my customer, pick up my customer card, go to my, that was that. Now I'll place that. Oh, maybe in function. Yeah, set rating. This will set the rating. It doesn't match to criteria, so that's why it was not called. But it's right now taking the implementation, which is defined by the extension. Now, the point that I want to make here is when you do this as an interface developer, you need to keep in mind of two scenarios. One, what happens at this point if the extension, the sub extension is removed? What will happen? Because the sub extension is being implemented on the sales and receivable setup. Option custom that is chosen here is coming from that sub extension. And the implementation is logic is running based on this rating method. So if as a user or as a system administrator, I go in and I say, I don't want this. What I do in this scenario, I come to my PowerShell and I say unpublish my BC container app. and I say the name is this, and my ABC container is this. And I don't want to save anything. I just want it to be removed. I don't like it. This is gone. There's no problems in removing it because it's just an extension and it doesn't have any dependency. So at this point, that AL interface sub is no longer exist in my tenant. But in my sales and receivable setup, and this is maybe something not that easy for a user to go and change because he don't know it, it's set to be blank. At this point, if I go to my customers and try to click on that action, which is available on the card, I'll get an error, enum does not contain a value 50,000, which makes sense to a developer, but not to an end user. And that's where if you are building an interface, you have to make sure that you set these two properties on your actual interface. What is the default implementation for your interface? Default means that will be set to default whenever the extensions get published. And then you also have to define an unknown implementation. And the unknown implementation will take care of the situation when your extension is removed. To give a user-friendly error message to your users when the when the extension is removed. So as an extension developer, while you're writing interface, when you are here on your enums, which is deciding the implementation, here you can set two properties. One is your default implementation, which can be any of your existing one. And you can say that it is standard. Oh, sorry, it's my rating. So anytime a customer deploys this, by default, they will be set to be my rating. And then you also have to make sure that you define an unknown implementation to be something, which is, let's say, SDH unknown rating. I have to define it on a separate code unit as we have done in the past. So what I'll do is I'll create a new file here and say unknown rating AL. I'll just copy the existing code unit of those here and then name it as 2003, change the name of it. I don't need to define anything over there because this is an unknown one. This is not to be used kind of thing. It is just to make sure that user gets the right message or the right steps to know where to change and what to change. All of these implementation, what I can write is a message that anything which is user friendly, like rating method is unknown. Please check the rating method in whatever setup that is. Whenever there is an unknown defined, if your dependent extension has been removed, system identifies. Yeah.
Saurabh, should it be error or message?
It's just a message, or it can be an error. It's up to you how you want it. Okay. It's up to you. It's just an it's not going to do anything. It doesn't change your data. It's just telling your customer that whatever the values that are defined on your setup are incorrect, rather than giving them an error message of NM value 50,000 does not exist. Right. So whatever you prefer, it's just up to the developer how they want to notify to their users is I can come here now and I say set rating, and it gives me a message that your rating method is unknown. Please check the rating method in sales and receivable setup. That's just what's needed. Why we need these two properties to be set in our enum so that user don't get a weird error message or a technical error message more or less when the dependent extension has been removed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Can you please go to sales and receivable setup where that rating method we were setting? I think before these properties, this was not editable. There was some issue in this, right?
No, this was editable, but because there was a value of custom, right?
Okay.
And the extension was removed, so that value is unknown, and that's why it says blank, because blank is not an option. So valid options are standard and last year sale, because the extension which have that custom option is being removed. So behind the scene, I'm pretty sure the rating method right now says 50,000, right? Or let's check that. I don't know how NM processes that request, but let's quickly have a look. It still have the value 50,000. And based on this 50,000, it's trying to execute the child extension implementation of that enum, which is defined here, because the 50,000 were attached to the custom rating. So the value is not removed. Value will not be removed, more or less, because that was an option added in the using enum extension. So if when you are building interfaces as the main app, you need to make sure that you define these two properties, and it will surely consume an object, but it'll give you that scenario where what will happen, or you can generate logical error messages, or maybe if the value is removed, you might want to utilize rating 2 or rating, and you don't want to tell your user to update the setup. It's also an option. You can just define that here. But these two properties were available recently. They were not available when the interfaces were launched initially, but they're quite useful because those were the situation where it was causing problem. The recent enhancement on the interface also is that you can now make it obsolete if you have to. Earlier, it was not possible to make an interface obsolete. Now you can make an interface obsolete, and all the implementations will generate a warning or an error message, so that your dependent extensions also know that you are going to remove it later by using a tag, which is normally the version when it was made obsolete, and then a reason that this will be replaced by whatever you are going to replace it to. This was not available in the past, but now you can obsolete the interface that you have defined, and your dependent extensions will always get all the warnings as they were marked as obsolete. Okay, Balaji, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, hi Saurabh. So you have unpublished the sub extension. So what in case when we unpublish the main extension and keep the sub extension and then execute, what will be the error message, or what would be the behavior when we click that action from the customer card?
So when you uninstall the main extension, the sub will automatically be uninstalled because it depends on that. You can't just remove the main extension, right? Because in your sub extension, there is a dependency with the main extension. So if the main extension goes away, the sub will also have to go away. You can't keep that because it depends on this. So if the main extension goes away, the system will warn you to remove the sub one first because it has dependencies.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, then I guess I'll leave you there for the weekend. The code will be available on the GitHub that we on my GitHub on that. I have to find that repo, but let me find that for you. But here it is. Okay. So it'll be available on this. I'll just commit this. So both the extension main we created last week, it's already there, all the source code that we have talked about. And the sub will come once I comment this after this meeting. So it'll be available. Sorry, somebody was saying something? I guess. Okay, if there is nothing else, then we can call it for the day and we'll see next week.
Thanks, Saurabh. It was quite informative.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you.
Thanks, man.